Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the fifth installment of the Overanalyst podcast, discussing various topics, both silly and serious, surrounding gaming as a culture and an industry. My name is Brady, or the Overanalyst on Twitch, and I am joined, as always, by my dear friends Martina, or Seth the Overwitch on Twitch.
Hi.
And Mate, or Comrade Potato on Twitch. We keep background for our audience. There is apparently another streamer called Commander Potato. At the end of one of Seth's streams, we accidentally shouted out or attempted to raid them. We have the Comrade. The commander is unaffiliated.
Yes, ours is the Comrade.
I think I'm just gonna change my name to Comrade / Commander Potato.
Brigadier General Potato. Get a promotion.
Oh god.
I just
noticed how
I
just noticed how
right
hard it is. Yeah, Mate, good job.
Yeah. Good job.
It took me a month and a half.
Yeah,
Don't worry, you're still
better late than never.
You're still better than my ex, who I was in a relationship with for over 2 years, and she still I think she outright refused to learn it properly. But
Did she call you Matej?
No, but you were pretty close.
Matij?
No, I'm not gonna tell you. I'm not giving you weapons against me. That's
At least you didn't get American mispronunciations. Over here, you'd probably get Marty or something like that.
Hi, Marty.
honestly, that would have been preferable.
I've gotten over the course of my life Brian, Brandon, Brody, Grady, and most inexplicably Brandy.
Excuse me, Grady?
Yeah, no, that is an actual name.
What? Okay.
Yeah.
Then Brady doesn't sound that bad.
No, it really doesn't. That's actually closer to my name than what many people have gotten. Brandy is what I don't get because that's a female name.
Also, drink.
Yes, and lots of people would actually apparently. This is so weird. Teachers when I was younger would always when they saw my hand, they'd be like, "Yes, ma'am." And I've had this voice and had to shave since I was 11. So.
Yeah, me too.
Which part?
Platformers!
Platformers,
No,
yeah.
On a more serious note, see, we had to reintroduce the humor that we deliberately excised from the last more serious episode.
Yep.
On a more serious note for this episode, today we're going to be discussing the evolution of the platforming genre as suggested by somebody over on Seth's Discord, correct?
I think that was either Marcus or Elfendar. Let me just check. It was actually
Bit of both?
Yeah, a bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, shout-outs to both of them, then, and thank you both for your wonderful suggestions. They've each given us a handful of really good topics that we could expand on. Platformers are near and dear to my heart as the genre that I'm probably most familiar with and have been since very, very early childhood. And that kind of defined not just an era, really, or a console generation, but several console generations in the 80s and 90s. So we're going to be looking into what, from a technical standpoint, constitutes a platform game, how they've evolved over time, various subgenres, and kind of where the market stands for them now. It's a timely episode as well, because I think it's safe to say over the past roughly 4 or 5 years, platformers have seen a major resurgence on consoles and PC, correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that ever since we got that beautiful game called Hat in Time, the platformers have had a nice return.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting, and we can get into this near the end of the episode, is these games kind of renowned for and so popularized for their simplicity to pick up and play and straightforward, comprehensible objectives have actually served as some of the greatest sources of character-driven or environmental storytelling over the past 10 years, I want to say. If I look at games like A Hat in Time or other platforming inspired titles like Hollow Knight or even kind of sort of No Straight Roads, you get a lot of Psychonauts. You get to see, I want to say, some of the stronger points of gaming as a vector or a medium for story-based or emergent storytelling based around player experience and exploration. In other words, I put you into a story and you get to run around and gather all the different like elements instead of what a lot of big budget AAA games do anymore, which is I'm going to grab you by the hand, slap the controller out of your hands, and drag you through this sequence of events that I want you to see because that's what you're paying for ostensibly.
Yeah.
But where should we start?
How about we start with the definition? What is a platformer actually?
Okay.
So, fun fact: before they were called platformers, since Donkey Kong games were kind of the first ones to fit into that description, they were called either the ladder game or the climbing game because because of the Donkey Kong series. The terminology of platformer didn't come up until I think maybe a year or two later when everyone started following the example of Nintendo. But also platformers are called jump and run games in some in some circles.
Certain markets too, right? I want to say there's some places around the world where platformer is not the most common like taxonomic term for this type of game to this day. You're right in saying that, ladder game was especially popular in the 80s, because it wasn't just Donkey Kong. A lot of early, what we would consider platforming games today, even I think something like Burger Time, right, which kind of sort of classifies, based around evasion and navigation and all that, were these single-screen games based around using ladders or slopes or things like that to maneuver around obstacles instead of confronting or destroying them directly. There were a lot of ladders, there were a lot of elevators or things like that that you could use to move like laterally from one level to the next. And I believe in internal communication, Shigeru Miyamoto referred to Donkey Kong while it was in production as like a climbing, running, leaping game or something like that. Something very clunky.
Yeah. Very precise genre.
Really rolls off the tongue.
Absolutely. I would play like a CRL game.
Yeah, I wouldn't. And apparently platformers have been the games that kind of brought out the video game industry back after the video game crash of the 83. So, I mean, personally, for me, platformers were the first genre of games that I've played because by design, they're really children-friendly, usually.
Very accessible.
The old ones. Yeah, very accessible as well. And the mechanics are always simple and always the same. You know, jump on platforms, collect stuff, get to the end of the level. So it was a very easy starting point for everyone, people that liked games and people that didn't like games.
Yes, and they were, as you say, very easy to pick up and play. A lot of titles, especially from the 80s or 90s, were based around extremely simple concepts, but that still immersed the player in an experience absolutely laden with action and tension. If you think like the original Mario Brothers, not Super Mario Brothers, like the two-player co-op game, it is an extraordinarily simple like project, but dear God, at higher rounds it becomes intense. So I want to say, and I am speaking from a personal perspective here, you could make a case for different types of games. On the whole, using the limited technological capabilities available to companies in the 80s and early 90s, platformers were probably the easiest way to design a, quote, high-octane, adrenaline-pumping experience. Like that nowadays you would get most readily from either really high-fidelity sports titles, or in my case, like character action games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. That kind of tension, you know? Well, Mate, what experience did you have with platformers growing up? Were they kind of as integral to your development as somebody in this space as they were to Tina?
Oh, Jesus Christ, yes. Like the first games I've ever played on any platform platform, get it?
Giggity.
Were platformers like Super Mario on the Nintendo,
Yeah.
Mario on the Game Boy, like the handheld one.
Mario
Uh,
Land.
I'm honestly don't remember. I did not play that much. I wasn't really into like those handheld console things back then. It was like, oh, why doesn't it have color? And I have to
Yep.
replace the batteries. But like on the PC, I think literally the first game I ever played on it was Jazz Jackrabbit, which
Mhm.
is I guess that was a little more complex than the beginning platformers because you also had the ability to shoot as well your
That was
enemies.
made. That was made by the team that would go on to create Duke Nukem, or am I wrong?
I'm not sure, but
Or Doom,
it
one or the
is
other.
the company that is now known as Epic Games.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
Oh
Dum
no.
dum dum.
But back then there were Epic Mega Games.
So they devolved over time.
Well,
Yeah,
no,
no
they
longer
lost the
Mega
Mega
Games.
Games, and now they've got the Mega Bucks, so it's all right.
Mm. Yeah,
Wait, I thought they're
trade
called
off.
V-Bucks.
Yeah, something or the other. We don't care about that. Brady, what was your very first platformer?
Ooh, goodness. It's going to be difficult, but reaching back, I want to say long before I got a console of my own, when I was very, very little, I'm talking like 2 or 3 years old. Um, I played the fire out of the now classic Super Mario World on my older siblings' Super Nintendo.
Mm-hmm.
And just not to put too fine a point on like the appeal of accessibility in these titles, because Mario World for the time was actually a fairly robust game, but it had a goal, it had an objective that was eminently understandable even to somebody as young as I was. And it presented a variety of different environmental challenges, but also aesthetics. Like, no two stages look exactly the same, even though a lot of them share biomes. So, especially for the time, it was a fast-paced experience that was always throwing something new at you. And I think for a child, that was very appealing. Then again, that's what I like in my games now, so maybe not that much has changed. Um, Growing up, I did spend a great deal of time playing platformers, but largely due to the time in question, I was born in 1997. Um, a lot of the platformers I played were those influenced by or directly derived from the so-called 3D revolution in the 90s. So more open world esque titles like your Mario 64s or Sunshines or what have you, or Banjo Kazooie, Wario World, which came out for the GameCube in, I want to say, 2004 and was one of my favorite games in childhood. A lot of stuff like that. So I played a lot of 3D platformers, a lot of collectathon platformers. They are always like near and dear to my heart. It's why, by and large, when I'm playing a platformer, as people may have seen, like the stream archives of me being reduced to a frothing mess by Crash Bandicoot games, which I do like, believe it or not. I tend to prefer those that are based more around exploration and environmental variance and storytelling than I do those based around more traditionally linear experiences with more of an emphasis on traversal, survival, and precision movement than over like actual design of an interesting world they want to immerse you in. So I've always been one for, I suppose, like the Hat in Times over the Braids, if that, or the Meat Boys.
Right.
That is a terrible
Mhm.
comparison. I'm sorry, but that's my experience.
Yeah, my first platformer ever was when I was, I think, 4 years old. Around that time, on the Game Boy, I got Castlevania: The Adventure,
Ooh,
and I think that was the first title for the Game Boy. And for me, as a little kid, it was super hard, but it was also the only the first game that I ever completed.
mm-hmm.
Um, it took quite a lot of batteries though, and my mom was really not happy about that. But yeah, and then it took me about 4 or 5 years until I got myself, well, didn't get myself, my parents got me
Right.
a console, and that was the first PlayStation. And on it, the only game that I've had was Spyro 2, a Ripto's Rage, or
Yeah.
as it was called in Croatia, Gateway to Glimmer. So yeah, and yeah, Gateway to Glimmer was, I think, the European title, and Ripto's Rage was everywhere else, or something like that.
The most incredible thing too, for those of you who aren't aware, like in the audience, Glimmer isn't some like key integral concept to the Spyro 2 lore. It's just literally the tutorial stage and never gets
Yep.
referenced again after you complete it.
Exactly. So it literally, the person who was translating the title or putting the title was just played 5 minutes of the game.
Well, but it's also where you begin. So maybe like the jewel case and the disc inside were quite literally the gateway to the first stage. Maybe somebody wasn't
That's a
just
bit of a stretch.
phenomenally lazy.
Of
course they were.
No, I don't believe. Yeah, and also the fun thing is that my mom used to love playing that as well. Like, she was never a gamer. She hated video games generally. My parents were very much against video games, and they still are. But my mom, for some reason, really liked playing Spyro, and I hated it because I would be watching my mother play and then miss some gems, and I would start screaming at her that she missed gems and that she doesn't know how to play. And like, my little child heart could not take that. That was too stressful to watch.
I am also a like OCD fueled completionist. I know the pain.
Yeah.
I'm not really a completionist. Like, I've never went to beat Crash Bandicoot 3 to what can you get, like 105% or something?
Yeah, somewhere around there. You need to get all of the gems from the normal and secret stages and all of the gold time trial relics. Thankfully, they do not require you to acquire all of the platinum relics for 100% completion.
Yeah, but
or
like
105 or whatever.
The first game that actually like compelled me to like play it completely, just get everything, find everything, just look for any secrets. Toomba 2, The Evil Swine Return. Such an amazing game. Like the story, I mean, even the animation for that time was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But I just loved that game. I think like a year or two ago, I played it again. I went to beat it all. I didn't go for like, finding everything, but I did go for like a full clear of the game.
And it holds up?
Oh yeah. I'm thinking I'm gonna play it again soon.
Why don't you could stream it?
Possibly, yes. I would
when
have
he gets proper internet.
Yeah, I would have to set up also like some sort of emulator, because I don't think I have a way to hook up a PlayStation 1 to my what's it called, capture card.
Not without the PS1 or the capture card bursting into flames, that is.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, like 30 adapters and 50 cables and just a little prayer hoping it works.
Something I found out during my research that was interesting to me is that platformers and their evolution, I think more so than a lot of genres from that time, if only because they're one of the oldest, like, continuously popular genres of games, were often really closely correlated to the technological capabilities of the machines they were designed for. For instance, a lot of the very early platformers were single screen, like score attack or time attack affairs, right? Like Donkey Kong, for instance, did have 4 different maps, but there was no type of scrolling or anything like that. They were just completely static screens, and once you made it to the end of one, you were blinked on to the next, and so on. The scrolling, like the gentle rolling transition from one screen to the next that we associate with a lot of platformers these days, I believe, was introduced for consoles in the mid to late 90s, or 80s. Sorry, not the 90s. God above. But similar gentle or fluid scrolling was more difficult on the first couple generations of handheld consoles. So how could you deal with this? Well, in the early 90s, and I believe there were pangs of this in the industry toward the end of the 80s, platformers which had gone from these single-screen affairs to multi-screen, more elaborate side-scrolling affairs, typically with a greater emphasis on intricate level design, asking players to not just avoid obstacles, but find certain objects in stages, or oftentimes just to increase score or something like that, but adding more interactivity and goals, and just generally becoming more intricate. developed this fascination with the phenomenon of like perceived speed, how quickly you can move through one of these stages with gentle continuous scrolling side to side, very smooth, very fluid. You could in essence give the player a feeling of just zipping along through a stage, almost running around at the speed of sound. The side note, this is where we get Sonic from. So console games became increasingly fixated on integrating speed and fluidity into the core design of a lot of platformers, side to side, as quickly as you want to go, as smoothly as you want to go, for something that had a very, very nice, not just visual effect, but game feel in your hands, right? But that wasn't possible on handheld consoles at the time. You simply couldn't get that kind of seamless, fluid scrolling. So what was more popular, a more popular direction for platformers to head in on handheld devices? Well, at the time, it would be either what is referred to as a puzzle platformer or just a much slower, kind of more deliberate affair. Something like Castlevania, like you mentioned, Tina. Something where players are encouraged to either bide their time or to plot out their moves before progressing onward, and where a lot of the emphasis is going to be placed on assessing the environment before you act over moving as quickly as you can. This is why a lot of handheld platformers well on into the 2000s tended to be, even when they were really good, more ponderous. I don't want to say cerebral, because that makes them sound like they expect more intellectually of the players than console platformers, which isn't true. But like more meditative affairs. The best example I have from my childhood, and this was for the Game Boy Advance, but it was one of my favorite platformers, even though it was slow and it was deliberate and it was kind of puzzly, was Wario Land 4, the entire Wario Land series. They're not based around being fast or flashy or particularly, like, cute. They're all about interacting with your environment, small environments, in a myriad of different ways in order to get everything that's been hidden away. So, yeah, I thought that was interesting. Consoles moved towards speed, handhelds, due to their constraint, focused more on puzzles and, like, integration of slower, more time-consuming mechanics.
You know, speaking of cerebral power and platformers, do you know the next game that I played after Spyro? Because I really enjoyed platformers at the time, and I thought, well, what could go wrong? Let's pick the next platformer from the list of, you know, the pirated games that like a neighbor had. And the next one was Bubsy 3D.
Oh wait, hold on. I heard Bubsy 3D. We're gonna have to get this whole experience. Okay, so quick preface before we have like a communal therapy session for Tina. Bubsy 3D was one of the first, like, quote-unquote big budget 3D platformers on console, based around the popular, mascot character Bubsy the Bobcat, developed by, was it Interplay?
Oh shit, I don't remember.
One of the firms that isn't a household name anymore.
Let me check, I can just quickly Google it.
Alright. And Bubsy 3D... Accolade, that's it. At a time when Spyro and Crash and Mario were becoming really popular and achieving success in 3D, Bubsy struck out in a fashion that is well remembered in the gaming space to this day. So now, Tina, I'm going to give you the floor. Just describe this game and your personal experiences with it for us.
So a little Martina did not know what the hell to expect. So I went into the game and I thought it's going to be like Spyro, you know, vibrant environments, fun collectathon. And then there was this, I don't want to call it cinematic. It was more like, you know, a very short video that kind of sounded like somebody was scratching on a blackboard with their nails. And I had no idea what was happening because I did not understand, like, the voices that they were trying to do were so bad that I couldn't understand anything. And suddenly I'm in this empty world. I have no idea what to do. Well, the only thing that I did know what to do is where to go, because there were those big obnoxious arrows that pointed somewhere. However, the issue was the camera. So I tried moving and I realized I can never move in the direction that I want to move. So little Martina thought, okay, I'm too stupid for this game. It took me a long, long time until I managed to finish, I think, the first stage, because, of course, quite a lot of it consisted of platforms that were high up in the air. And every time you would jump up in the air, the camera would go on top of Bubsy's head, and the whole perspective got messed up. So more often than not, you would just miss a platform, and God forbid if the platform was moving, because that was hell to jump on.
Yep.
Yeah, it was just a very terrible game. And then there were also some enemies which would they would not attack you by, you know, running towards you. They would all stay in one place like a turret and shoot at you. And the problem was, every time you would try to jump over a bullet, again the camera goes on top of Bubsy's head and you get messed up. So it took quite a while to kind of go through all of these stages, and then I managed to get to a boss fight. I got killed in one shot, and the game started from stage 1 again.
What?
So, yes. Apparently, there was also something wrong with the save feature, or I don't know, the checkpoint feature. In any case, that was my experience. And then at some point, I realized that I was supposed to gather some sort of rocket pieces.
Yep.
But no matter how many of them I collected, I would never get the right ones. Apparently, you could also get duplicates, which was absurd. So I think after maybe like 2 months of, you know, trying to religiously play this game to beat it, I just gave up. And then I went back to it when I was a 20-year-old, a little bigger child. And then I realized I was not stupid. The game is stupid. Like, the game is just not finished.
No.
Yeah, and I thought it was something wrong with my copy, because I was like, okay, maybe there is some sort of anti-piracy thing inside that makes this game virtually unplayable. But no, that was the actual game.
No, it's just that bad. And what you've described is a perfectly normal experience with Bubsy 3D. I'm so sorry that was one of your, like, first games in 3D.
I'm still in therapy for that.
Yeah, I understand why, believe me. 2 things to add as corollaries. One, at the very least, you did get the bright world you desired, because to those of our audience members who have not seen Bubsy 3D, you poor innocent souls, the entire world is comprised of these ugly-ass, like, polygonal structures with oftentimes no texturing whatsoever in eye-searing neon colors.
Yep. And they were all different colors, so they literally looked like, you know, a chessboard.
Yes.
With every sort of obnoxious color in it.
And it also bears mentioning that the game has probably one of the worst soundtracks I've ever heard.
That's my freestyle rendition of Bubsy 3D soundtrack. Thank you very much.
It sounds like a sound chip just crying for help.
Yeah.
Bubsy 3D, though, I think it bears mentioning, was a spectacular failure, but not only in the degree to which it failed. When we talk about the transition to 3D, this fabled period when not just platformers, but a lot of game franchises that had long been established since like the 80s attempted to migrate over into a 3D space with their core mechanics being translated for that type of experience, a lot of franchises had extreme difficulty making 3D maneuverability, exploration, or even world design work. So Bubsy was maybe the most iniquitous failure, but there were a lot of franchises that struggled. Sonic, which I know how people feel about Sonic right now. Trust me, it's sad. Sonic is like the great guy you knew from high school who was everybody's friend and always willing to help out, but you meet him like 15 years later at the local bar and he just looks a mess and like...
Oh, he basically became Drugs Bunny.
Yeah, no, exactly. Like, he peaked at 15. Like, that was as good as it got for him. But Sonic was, it bears mentioning, not just extremely popular, but a broadly envied figure and property within the industry. Like, Sonic platformers were, for a time, correct me if I'm wrong, in the pop culture consensus, kind of preferable to, or at the very least, just as good as Nintendo's Mario products. Like in the
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
They were quite popular. I think that at that time, there were more kids who were claiming that they were Sega kids than they were Nintendo
Yes.
kids.
Absolutely. And part of this is that while Nintendo has always received a really well-justified reputation for extremely robust, like seamless, smooth internal design, they also are a little bit more hesitant when it comes to extensive iteration upon their properties and mechanics than a lot of other development houses have been. Sega,
Yep.
on the other hand, was like, hell with it, gotta go fast. And they developed these intricate 2D platformers based around not only speed, but also exploring levels laden with lots of secrets and different paths you could take to reach end states. Like the average Sonic level's design was actually very intricate. If you look at like continuous 2D maps of say like Spring Yard
Yeah.
Zone or what have you, there's a lot there.
I mean, yeah, like I was really impressed how they managed to do those stages, because all of the stages were designed for you to go fast through them, right? So they were huge. You still needed to have a lot of content for, you know, the player who was going super fast to see. So yeah.
But come the 90s, as I said, and I do apologize if the timeline or chronological progression for this particular episode seems a little out of whack. A lot of things happen to platformers that change them radically as a genre. But coming into the 90s, the emergence of 3D technology and its application in games, which had been used for platformers on like PC platforms, or even very, in a limited sense, on consoles in the 80s. There were like a lot of computer games with very rough graphics that were based around using like tank controls to navigate a 3D environment in an acrobatic fashion, you know, that kind of thing. The big boys or the big kids started becoming involved in transitioning their properties to 3D. Nintendo obviously did this very well with titles like Super Mario 64, like the defining 3D platformer of the generation, probably. In the platforming space, Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time is an action-adventure game. But Sega, actually like more developers than not, had a very difficult time transitioning their key platforming franchise over into a 3D market.
Yep.
There were several like isometric 3D platformers, you know, using almost a 2.5D thing where you're like looking diagonally down on the character. Think like a CRPG, Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, something like that. And Sonic tried a couple of games like that. 3D Blast in particular is one you guys might remember. And they weren't great. Like, did you guys play any of the Sonic 3D games before Adventure?
No, the Adventure was my first one, yeah. But I saw the videos of those, and they did not look like something I would like to play, to be honest.
Yeah, they're not great. They're not terrible. They're just, like a lot of early 3D platformers on console, they felt very awkward, almost like they didn't know how to transition all of the components of the game to a 3D space.
Yeah, and I felt a little bit nauseous while I was watching the videos. I don't know, just that whole isometric thing with a platformer did not sit well with me.
No. And gauging, like, perceiving depth in games like that was often extremely difficult.
Yeah.
But while this attempt to translate a conventional side-scrolling 2D game over into a 3D space was difficult for a lot of people, the introduction of 3D technology and like world building also allowed for innovation within the platforming space, and it led to perhaps my favorite type of platformer, the 3D exploration-centric collectathon. Now, these are the kind of games I think broadly we all have a ton of experience with, right?
Yep.
What are some of your favorite 3D platformers? Seth, I know earlier you mentioned Spyro 2.
Yeah, so definitely Spyro 2. I didn't like Spyro 1 and Spyro 3, to be honest, not until they got remade for the Switch, well, for new generation consoles. But one of the games that I really enjoyed when I was a kid was Banjo and Kazooie.
Yes.
Honestly, if they decide to even just port Banjo and Kazooie to the Switch, I would scream. Like, I really want to see that happen. Also, wait, what was that one? There was one platformer, Mickey Mouse.
Yeah.
For the PlayStation. I don't remember what was the full title, but like you start in a level that's like black and white. It was side-scrolling platformer, so it wasn't 3D,
Oh,
but it was quite a modern design.
that sounds interesting, and I swear I've heard of that before.
Yeah, let me see.
And what about you, Mate?
Oh God, like some of my favorite ones. Well, I already said Tomba 2.
Mm-hmm.
From the newer ones, definitely Hollow Knight. God, I've played so many platformers, and I've liked most of them because
Yeah.
it's a nice little chill concept of the game. They're rarely like super difficult. Um, the Rayman series,
Oh, yeah.
I've played a lot of those. What else? Oh God, uh, Bugs Bunny, Lost in Time,
Mm-hmm.
and
Oh, yeah.
what was the other one? Bugs Bunny and Taz.
Time
Something.
Busters.
Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
Such a
yeah,
good game.
yeah.
Also one that I've played recently.
There were actually, side note, but there were some surprisingly solid Looney Tunes games released in the 90s and 2000s.
Oh yeah, they made great games.
Oh, I found out the name of the Mickey Mouse game. It's called Mickey's Wild Adventure.
Oh, that's not
It
what
was
I've heard
pretty
of.
cute.
Sounds
Mm.
lovely.
I think it was released only on PlayStation 1.
On the topic of Rayman, yes, absolutely. I adored Rayman 2, and this might be an unpopular opinion, especially Rayman 3 as a kid. There was something about, and this is something we'll talk about in a little bit more depth in due time, the extremely surreal, like, distinct worlds that Rayman 3 sent you through. Like, you spend the opening hour or so in a stereotypical, like, fairy forest that was a popular setting for Rayman. Then you get thrown into the nastiest looking backwood swamp imaginable.
Yeah.
To fight a witch and a big game hunter. Then over the course of the next like maybe 3 to 4 hours, you are sent through this weird psychedelic portal to another world based around disco, which I mean, obviously I'm a fan.
Yeah.
Rayman leads an assault on heaven halfway through the game, and it just keeps going from there.
Yeah.
I loved that. I did play a lot of both Mario 64 and Sunshine when I was a kid. Those were the games I had access to when Galaxy came out in 2007. I absolutely adored it. And I really liked the Sonic Adventure titles. I still do. I think as 3D platformers go, they're actually really well made. I didn't play the Spyro or Crash games at length until like just last year. And I love both. No, sorry, I take that back. I got Crash The Wrath of Cortex on PS2.
Okay.
The game that a lot of like big time fans absolutely despise for its inconsistent level design and kind of slipshod overall construction. I thought it was okay. But I also played the hell out of both Banjo-Kazooie and Crash Bandicoot Twinsanity, which is the closest thing to like an open world collectathon that Crash has ever seen. You got to play as both Crash and Dr. Cortex, oftentimes joined together, exploring 4 different really distinct worlds, each with their own stages, most of which ended in a pretty unique boss battle that used some of the stage's mechanics. It was a very well-designed game that didn't receive a lot of love. But those were the kinds of platformers that I grew up with and around, like typically 3D, typically open world with an emphasis on exploration and collection. And those are the types of games I hold near and dear to my heart. Hence why like A Hat in Time is like crack to me. Like it's just so
right.
good.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, what's like your most hated platformer?
Oh, that's a good question. See, I'm like you, Mate. I've not played a lot that stand out in my mind as being really negative experiences in my mind. Like, the closest I've come is probably, like, mediocre. And in that regard, I would probably have to say any licensed platformer I've ever played would occupy the bottom rung for sure, because they're just kind of maudlin cash-ins. But as
Yeah.
far as like games that you guys would definitely know and recognize, what's a really rough platformer? I want to say, honestly, an entire like slate of really rough, half-baked NES platformers could probably occupy that rung, where like the distance for jumps or the mechanics underlying them are really coarse.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you could classify Castlevania 2 as a platformer. If you could, it would be down there.
Yeah.
I want to say there was this Incredible Hulk game on Game Gear that was absolute trash,
All right.
and it
I
was
know that
technically
one,
a
yep.
platformer.
Mm-hmm.
Sonic 3D Blast is honestly down there. It's a game I did not enjoy in the least. But none of these to me are terrible games. Like none of them are a cyberpunk. They're
no.
just
Like maybe I phrased myself wrong. I didn't mean like what's the worst one you played. I mean like what's the one you hated the most for whatever reason that you did. Which one was
okay.
like, I
Sorry.
fucking hate this.
Easy. Crash Bandicoot 1.
Oh wow.
No, let me explain. Gerard Khalil put out an episode on the game that explains this far better than I can. But Crash 1, as a game, if you're just playing through to beat it, you don't care about completion, anything like that, is a really fun time. It is. It's designed well. It's got a lot of varied locales. There's this really nice sense of progression. You do feel like stage to stage, you're moving through this island chain from like its least to its most developed areas. It's got a lot of cool things going on. But the thing about Crash, guys, is Crash is really, really goddamn difficult. They all are, if you're going for completion. And in Crash 1, to complete the game, you have to beat several of the most difficult stages, smashing every box in one run without dying a single time throughout the entire stage. And unless you're playing in the Insane Edition, you get like one shot at this before you have to like quit and leave the entire stage and start over.
Yeah.
And some of those stages are relentlessly difficult, but okay, so Brady, why are you saying that difficulty alone constitutes a game as being bad? Well, it doesn't. Because Crash 2 through 4 are also very difficult games that are engaging in their own right. Crash 3 is one of my favorite games I've played on stream. The issue with Crash 1 is it requires so much of you, so much fine-tuning, so much repetition of levels to learn their little nuances. And it's a very simple game mechanically. You don't have half the maneuvers or the types of platforming challenges that incorporate or require them that would occur in Crash 2 and 3. So a lot of it's just very basic, bare-bones platforming that has been tuned to expect a ridiculous amount of skill from the player. So it's like a solid game from the time it was released if you don't go for those completion bonuses, but if you do, it becomes an exercise in frustration. 2 and 3 iterate on this far, far better. Crash 2 has one of the hardest moments, or one of the hardest stages I've ever played in a platformer, and I love it.
Right.
Pretty fair assessment.
What about you, Mate?
Oh, I was gonna ask what about you? But I can go first if you
You
want.
go first.
Okay,
Yeah.
so absolutely, by far, the most hated platformer I've ever played, PlayStation 1, Ape Escape. I don't know if you ever played that game.
Oh, yeah.
It's a great game. It's it's a fun little, you're catching some monkeys escaped. But the game is just like the controls. Okay?
Yes.
You have the left stick is movement. You're moving your character. Then you have your right stick, which is you're choosing which direction you're gonna swing your net in, like where you're gonna hit with the net. And then you have D-pad, which moves the camera. And you have to like coordinate all of those, plus all the jumpy jumps and all the other abilities. Well, for catching the fucking monkeys, I've never finished that game, and now I'm thinking maybe I should just to cross it off my list.
Let's not forget.
I hated it so much.
In this platformer, by the way, Ape Escape, great series. Ape Escape 2 and 3 are actually really solid. great games. But you're right about the first one, Mate. Let's not forget, too, jumping in this pretty difficult platformer is mapped to a shoulder button.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
You're right, it is amazing. It's a game...
Wasn't that also the first PlayStation 1 game that actually required the newer version of the controller?
The
Yes.
DualShock. Yeah, the first, and for a long time, I think it was the only one that actually like you had to have this.
Yes.
Yeah.
So yeah, the best way to describe Ape Escape is probably the first one just doesn't hold up all that well, honestly.
I mean, it wasn't that terrible. I was just,
No.
when did that game come out? Was it 99?
99, yes.
Yeah. So like I was 7 years old at the time, and it was like literally, guess one of the first like 10 games I've played on the PlayStation, and it was just like so much frustration. I think I tried to like beat it a couple of years later, and it just I ended up burning a copy of the CD just so I could break it in half. Just, to feel a little better about it. Like, yeah, I beat you, piece of shit.
You ever play Ape Escape Academy for the PSP?
No, I never had a PSP.
So it's a party game released like in late 2004, where you obviously get to play as one of like the little Peepo monkeys. And you have to progress through different series of mini games, each like hosted by a particular instructor. So like the Freaky Monkey 5 and Spectre from games 2 and 3. And it is unforgiving. Like, it is the hardest mini game collection I think I've ever played. But man, I'm looking now like at this information. The last mainline Ape Escape game we got was in like mid-2005. That is such a shame. Because it was a really good series.
I think probably now I really like it.
Yeah. Tina, what about you? What was your least favorite platformer?
So while you guys were talking, I actually had a very long thinking process about which one I would classify as my worst one, because I'm not quite sure, but there is one that I recently played that I hated for various reasons, and that is Yooka-Laylee. And first reason why I hated it was because it was supposed to be a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie, which is what really brought me to follow the entire process of Yooka-Laylee coming into reality. And it was quite disappointing, the result. So let's say if I did not know that it was a spiritual successor to Banjo and Kazooie, and if I didn't love Banjo and Kazooie as much as I do, I would probably not put it as my most hated game. Because it was mediocre at best, so it doesn't really deserve a lot of hate, but considering how they promoted it to be a spiritual successor to Banjo and Kazooie, it really did not do it justice.
Not at all.
And the second reason why I really hated it is the worlds were too empty. Like, they were huge, but they were too empty. So I really found myself quite often running from point A to point B and getting bored. So I don't know. I did the first 3 worlds. The first one was actually fine. I didn't mind it. But then afterwards, you get into this like icy stage.
Yes.
And honestly, firstly, it was annoying because of the ice mechanics that I generally hate in platformers. But also it was quite empty, and I really did not want to continue playing. Like, I genuinely did not care about the story anymore. I did not care about the characters. I was just annoyed at the game. The characters have no personality, and the jokes that they are trying to do are really not funny. I mean, they do have similar style of jokes as Banjo and Kazooie did, but that type of jokes were much better in the 90s. Nowadays, like, the humor does not stand the test of time, I would say.
Well, moreover, compared to Banjo-Kazooie, which at the very least had a lot of, I think a lot of charm and self-awareness. It would poke fun at itself and other platformers, popular culture at the time. I'm not saying that humor has aged phenomenally well, but you can still get a laugh or two out of Banjo-Kazooie. The problem I have with so much of Yooka-Laylee's not just humor but characterization is it kind of reminds me of a very poor attempt at a Ren and Stimpy kind of thing. It's just, oh, cute animals saying needlessly vulgar things non-stop. Oftentimes without context or cause. So it's like they saw Conker's Bad Fur Day, which was a game a lot of the dev team worked on, which did very well. Succeed on the basis of a lot of its absurdity and blue humor, and thought, okay, but let's integrate that into a more conventional, like, platformer that tries to play it straight. But as a result, you've got a lot of characters who have no personality other than talking about genitals or poop wherever they can. And that type of humor works best in a setting like a cutesy 3D platformer, I think, when it emerges as a subversion of expectations, when it's not something you expect to see.
Right.
But like when the third character you meet is a literal trouser snake, it's like, okay, are we done here?
I also was not really in love with the main characters because I remember Banjo and Kazooie having this like very nice back and forth. Like Banjo was this maybe a little bit dumb but kind bear that was trying to do everything right, and then Kazooie was this snarky bird that kept poking at him, and I kind of enjoyed it. But Yooka and Laylee are trying to do a very similar thing.
Yes.
But Laylee's just fucking obnoxious.
Awful.
Every time he would open up his mouth and start with his, I don't know, whatever you want to say, dialogue, I would just like fast forward. I was really not interested.
And Yooka has no personality whatsoever.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's interesting, you bring up the second stage, right? The glacier.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because, are either of you familiar with a concept in game design called a pain point?
No.
It's, as I understand it, industry jargon in some circles to refer to experiences individual players have. So it's not a general experience or something programmed into the game, but it's a part of your distinct experience as a player, where the mechanics or the level design or any facet of the game is inherently frustrating to you. And the way some devs have described this is players just kind of naturally encounter pain points as they play through a certain experience. And when they cross a certain threshold specific to them, they tap out and say, you know what, this is not worth my time. This isn't entertaining me. I found the Glacier stage in particular to be laden with personal pain points for me. Because, as you say, Tina, it's empty. A lot of objectives require an excessive amount of not just platforming, but platforming along the same exact course of obstacles again and again and again to reach. And while they do this really interesting thing with the back half of the stage, turning it into a giant isometric dungeon, the first half is just so both boring and frustrating to navigate that during my first playthrough, when I wasn't being held to the fire by a stream chat, it is where I tapped out. And it's a shame, because if you look at Yooka-Laylee's environmental design, the worlds, one and all, are beautiful. Like, the visual artists working on the game, I think, had a lot of talent. But the game design aspect wasn't there, and they didn't ask themselves oftentimes, okay, why do we have all of this space? What are we supposed to do with all of this space?
Yeah.
If you go back and look at Mumbo's Mountain from Banjo-Kazooie, the very first stage, it's not very big. Yeah. But there's something to do to earn a Jiggy or like one of the collectibles you need to progress through the game. Almost like every 10 feet or so, right?
Yeah, yeah.
It feels like an amusement park or something. There's all these different games you can play for tickets.
Yeah, yeah.
But good answer, both of you. God, Yooka-Laylee gave me some bad memories.
And apparently your glucose thingy went off.
No, that was my phone, actually.
Oh, okay.
oh, it says your glucose is low, Brady.
Oh, damn it. It's like the world's most annoying, patronizing version of Skynet.
Yeah. But anyways, what do you guys think about the new platformers in general, because for a very long time, platformers were just not represented anymore. There were not many titles, if any, to come out during the late 2000s and early 2010s. And then suddenly we started getting more and more of them. I remember when A Hat in Time came out, like when the Kickstarter was announced, and people just went crazy because everyone was hungry for more platformers. And then suddenly there were these amazing titles popping out. Like most of them were kind of Metroidvania style platformers, but also that there were some beautiful 3D ones. So I already mentioned A Hat in Time. Yooka-Laylee came out, even though, you know, I hate it, but it was still something. And also, what is it called? Super Lucky Stale.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we've seen a resurgence in interest in more traditional platforming franchises like Crash and Spyro.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, with the remakes. But, I mean, it's not that they didn't come out. It just wasn't that many of them. But there were some good ones in, like, late 2000s, early 2010s. Have you played Super Meat Boy?
Oh, yeah, I did. But I kind of... Yeah, it is a great platformer, but I always put it in the category of, like... those games that you play when you're a masochist, you know, the ones that are made purposely to be super hard, and yeah,
like a
kind of like Celeste.
But it wasn't that hard.
Kind of like Celeste.
Like I didn't find it, I mean, I didn't go for like, oh yeah, best times ever, but it wasn't like that hard to like beat it with a satisfying score, you know, at least for me.
Well, I'm a perfectionist, so...
Same here.
Yeah. I'm not really. I'm a completionist more.
You're a good enough kind of person.
It's done.
An adequate.
Let's not dwell on it.
An adequate. Oh, you can put that on your business cards.
I'm a professional. The over adequate.
Yeah, I mean, Super Meat Boy was pretty fun, I gotta say, and it was kind of different. It was it was very gory, and it was not typically the style that platformers would go for, since they were trying always to be more accessible to younger audiences, or like be PG-13 basically, and then you see Meat Boy with all of that blood and stuff, and you're like,
also, like,
what?
His girlfriend is a bandage, and his nemesis is Dr. Fetus.
And his child?
Oh, no, that's Super Meat Boy Forever, like the new one that came out in 2020 for the PC, and I think like
very recently.
This month it should come out for the consoles. And like, okay, give me a second. I need to read you the plot beginning of this new game.
Please do.
Oh yeah, okay. Ah, crap. Okay, here we go. The game takes place a few years after the original Super Meat Boy, with Meat Boy and Bandage Girl enjoying life while having a picnic with their newborn daughter, Nugget. Suddenly, Dr. Fetus attacks them both and kidnaps Nugget. They both go on a quest to save Nugget.
Did they say Nugget too many times?
Oh, there's plenty more nuggets when, like, in the later description of the plot. But, like... Who comes up with this? But the game is apparently not as good as the original Super Meat Boy, because they made the levels like randomly generated. They have chunks of levels, and they just like take the chunks and like build levels out of it, which kind of defeats the whole like intention of the first game, which was you have a level, it's a bit more like difficult, and it's, you know, increasingly difficult. And like you could compare your scores to others, like, you know, oh, who's gonna be the fastest, and this is just like, oh, it's random.
What?
It might be easy, it might be hard.
We should do a program on procedural generation one of these days.
Oh yeah,
because I think, for me personally, after like the abusive business practices that have really become popular in the AAA space over the past couple generations, you know, your crunch, your microtransactions, your season passes, all of that, It's probably the single worst thing that's happened to a lot of game development projects in like the past 20 years. See here, No Man's Sky, Mass Effect Andromeda, and so on. Not that it doesn't have its uses, but yeah, I've heard that Super Meat Boy Forever is actually kind of mediocre for that reason.
Or worse.
Right. Tina, to your original question regarding like the resurgence of platformers and how we feel about them, I think this is one of those spaces where, unsurprisingly, again, all three of us are in complete and total agreement. I could not be happier about this, because as much as I love my deep, story-rich and like world and lore-intensive RPGs or action RPGs in particular, I have a certain soft spot for 3D open world or pseudo open world exploration heavy platformers, just like I do for character action games. And it's interesting. I did find this figure, according to I think one piece of research, in the late 90s, which is well after the genre's heyday, right? Platformers still commanded an impressive like 15% of the video game market. And like 4 years later, that had dropped to just under or around 2%. I think it's because as 3D technology became more accessible and integrated into a lot of development houses' kind of design ethos, they started thinking of, well, what are other ways we could use this technology? What are other ways we could make games using all of the technical capabilities we have available to us that we couldn't do before? So you start to see more robust or fast, exciting sports games or action games, action adventure. The extremely vague, quote, action adventure label is what totally defined like the PS2, GameCube, Xbox generation for me, because it was almost all encompassing. So you're both right in that we didn't see a lot of platformers for like the first 10 years of the new millennium, but a lot of what we did see, like Super Meat Boy, were really high quality indie projects made with a lot of love, or AAA takes on classic platforming, integrating some of the mechanics of platforming games into other genres or blending them into hybrids. Like you would have action RPGs that involved a lot of platforming, or brawlers that involved more platforming, just as like part of world navigation to integrate verticality or things like that. And you did have some franchises like Billy Hatcher, rest in peace, or Sly Cooper that
rest in peace.
They got like 1.5 games, and that was it, which is a shame because the original Billy Hatcher and the Giant Egg is an amazing title. But like, yeah, you had Sly Cooper, which integrated platforming into just a pretty solid, really fun all-around 3D platformer for its first title, but for the subsequent three, fused platforming and an open-world exploration and mission like completion format that kind of felt like Assassin's Creed with personality. So there were some properties that flourished in this space, but they weren't often what we would consider quote-unquote pure platformers, right? And we start to see a resurgence in traditional platformers from around 2015. We start seeing games like A Hat in Time, Mario Odyssey. On Steam, I think over the past few years, there was a duology of games released called Spark the Electric Jester, which are both great platformers. Sonic even returns to form with a title like Sonic Mania. There's just a lot more interest in this space and in creating games, not necessarily that are based around platforms, but this is something I love, that are based around environmental storytelling and diversity, right? One of the things I love is being placed in an environment, usually like a lush 3D environment, and being able to tell right off the bat that, whoa, this environment feels, not just as far as what I'm told about it, but how it looks, how it sounds, what kind of enemies or obstacles are there. It feels totally different from the last environment I was in. This is something that a lot of open world, like AAA games of the past 20 years have kind of moved away from, and they've moved towards more homogenous, less distinct worlds that were still way too fucking big. But it's something that a game like A Hat in Time does so well, every stage, every environment is big, yes, but they all feel totally different, and they all feel like Mario 64 did, like Spyro did, like they respect the player's time and intuition, because you're able to move through these stages and find new things to explore, to interact with, to collect everywhere, and it all feels like it has a purpose. So you've got totally new visuals, totally new sound, totally new obstacles, and totally new objectives that will give you new paths of progression throughout the rest of the game as you undertake like entirely on your own, without being handheld every step of the way, to explore these spaces. And to me, that's what a great platformer is about, the ones I grew up with anyway. The joy and incentivization of actual exploration. Not saying, here's 20 of the same exact bandit camp, go clear them out, they're all going to feel exactly the same. But making worlds that feel like they've got scores of totally unique secrets that you can uncover, and leaving it to you to dig them up. That's what I love about a platformer. Sorry, I know I've been talking a lot this episode, but this is one of the subjects I get really passionate about.
Oh, no worries. That's what we're here for, to talk a lot.
Exactly. Well, I'm just here to listen to Brady talk passionately about things.
Oh.
It's just easier to hear it live. Alone? No, it's just easier to hear it live than wait for you to edit and publish the episode.
Fair enough. I still hate you, but fair enough.
Oh, you hate me. Nice.
So, what are your guys' hopes for the future of platformers? What would you like to see? Any sort of maybe a series or one specific game that you would like to see a sequel?
Yes, please. If you're listening, Toomba 3, come on, do it. I don't know. I'd like to see a sequel of a lot of games I've played in my childhood.
Well, of course, we're talking just about platformers, though.
Yeah, that's what I mean. I played mostly platformers when I was a kid. So yeah, just a lot of them. Like not one of the mainstream ones, like, let's remake a Crash or a Spyro or something.
Right.
Just find something that was good back then and just sequel, please.
Toomba 3, okay.
Gears for breakfast. I love you all. You're an incredibly talented, passionate bunch. Know you've probably got other projects in the pipeline, but if we could revisit the Hat in Time universe with like a larger budget and more worlds at some point down the line, you're probably the most creative team I've seen working in this space in a long, long time. Please, God, Hat in Time 2, a Hat in 2. Let's do it. Also, and these are AAA aspirations or desires. We got a really good Crash 4, and I would love to see the Spyro team or a team tackle Spyro and attempt to modernize that style of not exactly open world, but 3D collectathon with the capabilities that we have available to us in the modern era. Aside from that, I hope that Nintendo carries on in the direction they've been heading, with finally, after largely corporate mandated stagnation during the Wii and Wii U eras, introducing brand new worlds and world design principles to games like Zelda and Mario. If we get another Mario 3D game that is as distinct, that is as new, that introduces as many new places and concepts and ideas as Odyssey did in the next couple of years, I would be very, very happy. Aside from that, I know I've got a lot of these, but I've put a lot of thought into this. I would say a sequel to, honestly, another Sly Cooper game would be great for me, because Sly 4 was an incredibly well-produced game. It's the best thing Sansaru Games has ever done. And it just didn't receive the attention or marketing requisite to really make it a hit. And I think that's one of the areas where, like with a lot of genres, corporate structures attempted to stamp out a certain type of game by saying, yeah, well, we're just not going to support this. We're not going to advertise this because people don't want it. Well, yeah, nobody wants what they don't know about. And I guess my last suggestion would be a sequel to Cyberpunk 2077, because it's every bit as much of a platformer as it is an open world immersive RPG, which is to say not at all.
Yeah, but in order to release a sequel, they'd have to finish the first one, though.
Yeah, you're right.
Oh,
Aw.
all right. I think my candidates would be. I definitely want to see a proper sequel to Banjo Tooie,
Mm-hmm.
so a Banjo 3E. That would be quite nice. Also, well, one of the platformers that I like the most is already getting a sequel, and that is Hollow Knight. So the
Yes.
Silk Song should come out pretty soon. And let me see. I also would really, really enjoy if Sly Cooper would finally, get his proper resurrection. But yeah, those are my candidates. I would say nowadays I'm not that much into platformers as I used to be.
Mhm.
So I'm not really the target audience for them anymore. But when I replayed the Spyro series, well, the Reignited trilogy, I had such a huge nostalgia trip that, yeah, I think that I would enjoy at least older titles getting renewed.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what about, like you said, Seth, you're like looking forward to the Hollow Knight sequel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like which game are you excited that's coming out soon, or sometime this year? I guess Brady.
Psychonauts 2, far and away. I've not mentioned it so far because it's this really interesting blend of like adventure game, action, and platforming mechanics. But the original
Mm-hmm.
Psychonauts is probably one of my 10 or so favorite games of all time. It's just got such beautiful, oftentimes poignant writing and like audio visual design. Again, another one of
Mm-hmm.
those games where every single stage looks, feels, and plays totally different from the last. Um,
Yeah.
Particular shout out to Black Velvetopia, the second to last stage in the game, which is gorgeous. The entire thing's done like
Mm-hmm.
a neon painting on black velvet. The entire visual style is totally different. You
Yeah.
can look up screenshots on Google and it's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Psychonauts 2 sometime this year. What about you guys?
Yeah, I actually
Um,
forgot about Psychonauts too.
yeah,
So
me too.
that's good. That's good. Might have to replay the first one just to like r- remember stuff. But the one I'm looking forward to is, and hopefully getting my hands on a PS5 someday soon. Is the Ratchet and Clank Rift Apart.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have not even mentioned Ratchet and Clank, but that was also one of the nicer platformers I played. Unfortunately, I played it way too late because I did not own a PlayStation 2.
Mm-hmm. Ratchet and Clank, Jak and Daxter, and Sly Cooper were kind of like the holy trinity of advanced hybrid platformers for the
Yeah,
PlayStation 2.
yeah. And since you mentioned Psychonauts, earlier today I went on Metacritic just to see the platformer game scoring, and apparently Psychonauts is the highest scoring platformer game uh, for users, like in user scoring category. So that's quite
Mm-hmm.
cool. The second one is Terraria for some reason. I would not call that a platformer
No.
in
Not really.
at all. And the third one is Braid.
Oh.
So
Brady.
yeah, when it comes to platformer games voted by Metascore by the critics, the first one is Fez,
Okay.
and it's actually sharing the first place with Mark of the Ninja, which I played a while ago. But I don't know. It is a platformer if we're gonna go strictly by definition. But I think the major part of this game is actually stealth.
Yes.
So yeah,
It's almost like almost like a puzzle action game more than anything
yeah,
else.
yeah, exactly. The third one apparently is Spelunky, which again I would not
Hmm.
call a platformer at all. For me, that's more of like a roguelike.
Is it closer to platforming than the other two though? I want to say it is.
Yeah,
Or no, not
yeah,
Fez.
it is.
Sorry, not Fez. Fez is a
No,
straight up
Mark of the
platformer.
Ninja. Yeah. Then we have Braid and then Rayman Legends.
Okay.
Also,
Okay.
we haven't mentioned another smaller title that also was quite a big hit for a while, and that is Limbo.
That's right.
Yeah,
We began
and
to
its
see
sequel Inside.
a lot of games like that come out of the indie space in like the late 2000s, right? A bunch of
Yeah.
platformers that attempted to tell deeper, more cerebral stories. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm totally fine with that. The problem is like games like Limbo and Braid especially, which I'm sorry to say I just do not like at all. Um are well designed, but they sacrifice a lot of the visceral and really florid, distinct world and encounter design that I prize in platformers for the sake of being, dark and serious TM. Limbo's a beautiful game, though. Limbo in particular is absolutely gorgeous. What are you most excited for, Tina?
I would say Silksong, because Hollow Knight is one of the better games that I've played in the last 10 years. Not only platformers, but like games in general.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited to see the sequel. And also, I forgot to mention earlier, but one game that I would really like to continue its life would be the Ori series.
Yeah.
Because that's such a beautiful. Those two games that came out, Will of the Wisps and Blind Forest, are absolutely beautiful, and not even because of its gameplay and story, but just the entire environment and music, like all together, is a very very unique experience.
I for one am just glad that we're reaching a point where the community is diverse enough, like the player base is diverse enough, and indie and mid-range studios are now powerful and prominent enough to where we've been able to see resurgence in platformers instead of the brown and gray military shooters that every single Western development and publication house insisted we wanted to play nothing but in the late 2000s.
Call of Duty 50, yeah.
Call of Duty 50, like this time it's the Cold War, but with lemmings for some reason.
World War 1.5. It's gonna happen.
But yeah, I think we've all ended or reached the end of our introspections on platforming with a pretty positive outlook on the genre's future, right? It seems like things are only getting better.
Yeah, and I think this is the most positive episode that we've had so far, so that's nice. Well, we're not shitting on anything.
Except Cyberpunk.
Because that is a mandate. That is now part of the podcast.
Yeah.
But it's because we were able to all reflect on things we absolutely adored as kids, some of the first experiences that really got us into this hobby.
Yeah, that's true. Oh yeah, I would also like to see Castlevania for the newer generation, because that was one of the better Metroidvania, Castlevania, Metroidvania.
It was the original Metroidvania Symphony of the Night.
Yeah, of course. And I'm really surprised that they did not release so far as I know, anything on the Switch. Did they?
Maybe some ports, but I don't think anything original. No.
Yeah, no original titles. So yeah, that was a bit weird.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the last really big budget Castlevania game was Lords of Shadow 2.
Yeah.
Which was okay.
And that was on PC, right?
PlayStation and Xbox. It was console, I believe.
Then the first one was on PC. Yeah.
Lords of Shadow 1, I mean, it's not a traditional Castlevania. It's like God of War like. It's a character action game, but it's really good.
Yeah, I mean, the entire story, I feel it's very good. I mean, it's so good that Netflix picked it up to make an animated story, so, there is some potential.
And I've heard that's also very good. The animated series?
I've watched it. Yeah, I watched it, and it's really good.
I haven't.
Nor have I.
Well, you should.
All right. Thank you all so much for joining us today to reflect on our childhoods and our kind of early furtive steps into gaming as a hobby, and for some thoughts on the platforming genre in general. I know this episode was a little freeform, but I think it does us all a great deal of good to have something a little lighter and smoother following tackling such a serious topic last week, like to decompress. I do hope that if you're not familiar with a lot of the games, especially the indies we've mentioned today, and platformers are generally up your alley, that you'll possibly consider taking a look at them. Indie studios like Gears for Breakfast, Behind Hat in Time especially, rely quite heavily on fan engagement and dissemination of knowledge through word of mouth. So if this is something, this resurgence of platformers, the diversification of games available within the space are something you like and would like to support, please consider checking out some of these independent titles and supporting them with your wallet. Until next time, when we'll be taking on another topic from the world of gaming as a culture or as an industry, depends on the week. We wish you nothing but the best. Until next time, I'm Brady, or the Overanalyst on Twitch, joined as always by Martina, or Seth the Overwitch on Twitch, and Mate, or Comrade Potato on Twitch, the OG, the one true potato.
Be honest, do you have it written down?
No.
Oh, then
I'm
good
that
job.
good. It's only taken me 3 tries.
Good job.
Thank you all so much for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care.